Okay, this video is on electrical distribution. And so, uh, first it's important to establish, I made a video first, but then I accidentally screwed it up, so I'm redoing it. But let's just talk specifically about how electricity, and it looks like you saw that one video, how electricity gets from the power plant to the jack in your house, right? So in your house, you have these things, right? One of these is called the hot. One of these is called the neutral, and one of these is called the ground. And what's interesting is the electrical company doesn't deliver all three of these to your house. You know, like you think of like sometimes with electricity, a positive and a negative. It doesn't work like that in this case. So with the electricity, what the power company actually delivers to your house is only the hot. And what happens with the neutral and the ground is in your electrical box, these are actually tied together. And in most cases, they're tied together and then they're actually delivered to the ground. So they might be attached to a pipe or something. I don't know exactly how they do it, but these are like physically attached to the ground, physical to the ground. And so why is that? So go way back to where the power plant is, right? Somewhere in Illinois or Wisconsin or wherever it is you live. I guess this video is for Joe or for anybody who's watching this, I suppose. There's a power plant, right? Boop, 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 boop. It's like giving off steam or smoke, right? And in all these cases, if you think about all the different types of power plants, right? There's natural gas. There's nuclear, right? Nuclear. I probably spelled that wrong. There's coal. There is wind turbines, right? Wind turbines. And what all these power plants do, every single one of these wind turbines, coal, nuclear, natural gas, you can think about geothermal, right? Geothermal, if you're in Iceland. And all these things do is spin a turbine. 100% of these. All they do is they have a turbine that spins. So there's something happening. Let's think about like nuclear, right? Nuclear, you're splitting atoms, right? Atoms are being split, blah, blah, blah. They're generating heat. That heat generation is creating steam, and that's being fed into a turbine, into like a pressure tunnel of some kind, which is spinning a turbine. And so you can think about like, so then you've got these turbines are pretty crazy looking in reality, but what they're doing, and then this is sort of going out, and it's like steam being going out. But what's going on is there's a turbine in here that's being spun, and the turbines are connected. So let me make a new one. Set as default. Discard. Okay, so let's talk about how the turbines work. So what happens is in the power plant, you could make a very simple turbine. I've made a couple, and what they are is they're essentially this. They're essentially a rotor, and attached to that rotor are magnets, usually 3 magnets. This is sort of the most standard case. 3 magnets, right? Magnets. 1, 2, 3, and they're in a tube, and attached to the side of the tube are, I'm going to put these in red, copper coils. Copper, Cu. So there's one here, one here, one here. This is the most simplest case in the case of like a nuclear plant. It's vastly more complicated, but it's essentially fundamentally this thing. And so what happens is as these magnets spin, if you were to say, look at this copper coil here, right? As this magnet passes through, you can think about the strength of the magnetic field looking like this, right? So as the magnet gets closer, it's like the strength of the magnetic field gets stronger, and then it gets away, the magnet gets further. And in fact, because magnets have 2 poles, if you were to sort of think about it like this, sort of positive and the negative pole, right? The positive strength gets higher, and then like that, right? And so every time a magnet passes a copper coil, this is happening, right? The magnetic field gets lighter, the magnetic field gets positive, stronger, and then it goes and it's negative, and it moves on, right? And so this happens every time a magnet passes one of these. And so what happens here is if you think about what's happening inside this copper coil, is you've got this copper coil, right? And there's a bunch of electrons in here. These electrons, right? These are all copper atoms. and they all have free electrons, like copper and a few. They all have sort of a free electron in here, sort of one for each. And so what happens is as the magnet gets closer, the electrons all get pulled one way. And then as we approach sort of the negative, right, the other side of the magnet, it pushes the electrons the other way. So they're going in and they're going out, and they're going in and they're going out. And so as this rotor spins and spins and spins and spins, the copper atoms are being pushed in, copper atoms are being pushed out, push in, push in, push in, push out. And so this is fundamentally how alternating current works. So what happens is, and so this pushing that happens down at the power plant gets pushed all the way to you, all the way to your house, to whatever device you're using. Because they're doing it with such a large rotor and such a like large pieces of equipment. I mean, if you look at some of the nuclear like turbines they use, they're like the size of like buildings. They're huge, and so they're pushing these things in and out. And in fact, they're doing it 60 times per second. It spins at a specific speed, 60 times per second, which is 60 hertz, which is the frequency. And when you look at the actual sort of frequency of voltages, so this ends up mapping into voltages. So what 60 hertz means is 60 times a second, you have a positive voltage and you have a negative voltage. So it goes like this, up, down, up, down, up, down. And 60 hertz means you get 60 of these cycles. So 60 times a second, it's going up and it's going down. And so what does that what does it have to do with like our projects and stuff, right? And some of the work that we're doing. So what happens then is, do a new one, save changes. So you've got the power plant over here. There's the power plant, right? And you've got towers, and each one of these towers. So when we thought about that rotor with the magnets that was spinning, each one of these phases is called a phase. Each one of these like copper coils here is a phase. And so what they look like practically is as this magnet passes this one, right, it's going to go up and then down and like that. And then this one is next. So as it hits this next one, it's going to go up and then down and then over. And then as it hits the third one, it's going to go up and then down and then over. And so when we talk about phases, it's like this is essentially phase one, this is phase two, this is phase three. If you actually go and look at a power line, like if you go look at a tower, they're actually labeled A, B, and C. And you can go like just into your backyard, into the alley, and look up, and you'll see a pole, right? You'll see a pole, and they even put little tags on them, A, B, and C, and they kind of hang out like that. And the lines kind of go through each of here. And each one of these lines is a different phase. And so this is called three-phase distribution. Three-phase distribution. And it's kind of arbitrary that they did three distribution. You could put 4 coils around here and do 4-phase. You could put 100 coils around here and do 100-phase. But we've just all standardized on 3-phase. I don't really know why, but that's just, we've all picked 3-phase. And so sometimes you'll see lines that have like 6 things on them, or a tower that's got 6 things. And what they actually is, it's 2 circuits. It's 2 sets of 3-phase distribution. So it's ABC and then CBA. Just sort of stacked on top of each other, but they'll have what that functionally maps to is two different turbines in the power production facility. And so that's why you'll see coming out of a power plant, you'll see like, I don't know, 5 or 6 towers, each with 2 phases, because they have a lot of different turbines. They're not just turning one turbine, they're turning, in some case like dozens of them. Okay, so what does this mean practically? So this means we've got the power plant. Boom, boom. Here's the power plant. Here's your house, right? So what happens here is the power leaves here, all these different phases. There's probably, there's all these phases, and they're all going to be separated, right? These 3 might go to this town over here. These 3 might go to this town over here. These 3 might go to this town over here. And, usually coming out, they're pretty high voltage because it's sort of like they have these massive turbines. And so what happens is they're coming to the power plant at 500 kilovolts or 765 kilovolts. They come out at really high voltages because it's sort of the place of production. But when you're in your house, your wall is 110 volts. You're not using, 500 kilovolts. You would die. But along the way, they step it down a bunch of times. And so this is actually something that's unique about alternating current only. Alternating current is you can actually step down the voltage. So that's cool because what that means is they can take the 500 kilovolts and they can send, 265 to one town and 265 to another town, and they can do all sorts of stuff where they step down and step up the voltage. And they, you actually lose a lot of heat. There's, you watch that other video. There's a ton of things that happen along the way, but essentially the distribution sort of trends. It's like this. But practically, you also have to think about, so this is voltages. You also have to think about, every time an electron moves that and that, we're talking about these electrons moving forward and backwards, 60 times per second. Every time we're pushing those back and forth 60 times a second, like at massive scales. But the electrons aren't in an alternating current. Electrons are not physically moving, right? I mean, they are. They're just moving tiny that way, tiny that way, tiny that way, tiny that way. And so it's just this massive power moving things forward and backwards. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a second, and then I'm going to make another video because what happens here is actually really important. What happens at these transformers and what happens along the route is actually super important. So I'm going to stop, send this to you, and then I'm going to record another one.